Last night may have been the moment Britain's political system officially started to crack. Not slowly, not quietly, but violently, in full view of the country. While millions of people across the UK were asleep, a political earthquake was tearing through England. Councils that had belonged to Labour for generations suddenly collapsed. Conservative strongholds began slipping away. And one insurgent party that many political commentators once mocked as a protest movement suddenly exploded into the national spotlight. Reform UK didn't just gain ground. They detonated the map. And now, Westminster is panicking. Because what happened last night wasn't just another local election story. It wasn't simply a bad night for one party or a temporary protest vote from angry citizens. What we may have witnessed is the beginning of the end of Britain's two-party system. For decades, British politics has revolved around the same two giants, Labour and the Conservatives. Different leaders, different slogans, different scandals, but the same structure always survived. Power shifted back and forth between the two while smaller parties remained stuck on the sidelines. But now, that system is beginning to look dangerously fragile. And voters are no longer hiding their anger. 3 major elections took place simultaneously across Britain. Local elections in England alongside major votes in Scotland and Wales. At the time this video is being made, only part of the results have been declared. Scotland and Wales are still counting. Many councils across England haven't even finished announcing yet. But despite that, the trend is already impossible to ignore. Labour is collapsing in areas it once completely dominated. The Conservatives are bleeding support almost everywhere. And Reform UK, once dismissed as a fringe movement, is suddenly storming into real political power. This is the nightmare scenario Britain's political establishment hoped would never happen. Because when voters stop believing in the traditional parties, chaos follows. Now, before we go deeper, it's important to understand just how strange these elections actually are. Unlike a national election where the whole country votes at once, Britain's local council elections happen in cycles. This year, only around 136 of England's 317 councils were up for election. That still meant roughly 5,000 council seats were being contested. And here's where things become extremely important. Most of these councils were last contested back in 2022, the exact moment Labour was soaring in national polls. Back then, Labour was averaging around 40% support nationally. Keir Starmer looked unstoppable. The Conservatives were in chaos after years of scandals. Reform UK was barely relevant, and the Greens were still treated as a niche movement. As a result, most of the councils voting last night were already controlled by Labour. 83 of the 136 councils up for election belonged to them. The Conservatives controlled only 22. The Greens controlled just 1. Reform UK controlled none. On paper, this should have been manageable for Labour. Instead, it became a bloodbath. Because Britain in 2026 is not Britain in 2022. Since then, Labour's polling numbers have collapsed. Public frustration has exploded. The cost of living crisis continues squeezing households. Immigration remains deeply divisive. Trust in politicians has fallen through the floor. And millions of voters now feel abandoned by both major parties. That frustration erupted last night. And the numbers coming in are staggering. At the time of recording, Reform UK had already won more than 400 council seats. Labour, around 250. The Conservatives, barely ahead of them. Even the Liberal Democrats were surging. Meanwhile, the Greens were quietly building momentum that could soon transform local politics in several major cities. But raw seat totals only tell part of the story. The real shock came from where Labour was losing. These weren't just marginal areas. These were fortresses. Places Labour had controlled for decades. Places where people assumed the party could never truly collapse. And yet, it happened anyway. One of the earliest warning signs came shortly after 2 a.m. in Hartlepool. Political insiders were watching closely because early council declarations often reveal the national mood before the full picture emerges. What happened there stunned observers. 12 seats were up for election. Reform UK won every single one. Labour lost complete control of the council. That alone would have been humiliating enough. But things were only getting started. A little after 3 a.m., another bombshell arrived from Wigan. For decades, Wigan has been seen as classic Labour territory, a working-class stronghold, a symbolic part of the party's political identity. It's also represented in Parliament by senior Labour figure Lisa Nandy. And yet, despite all of that history, Labour lost every single seat it defended. Every one. Reform UK stormed through the council like a wrecking ball, picking up seat after seat while Labour supporters watched in disbelief. Technically, Labour still retained overall control because only 1/3 of the council was being contested this year. But politically, the damage was devastating. Because symbolism matters. And when voters in lifelong Labour towns suddenly abandon the party en masse, alarm bells start ringing across Westminster. Then came Tameside. And this may have been the moment panic truly set in inside Labour headquarters. Tameside had been controlled by Labour for nearly half a century. 47 years. Generations of political dominance. Gone. 19 seats were up for election. Labour defended 17 of them. They lost 16. Reform UK won 18 seats overall, leaving Labour without a majority and forcing the possibility of coalition control. That result wasn't just bad for Labour. It was historic. And then, just before 7 a.m., the political map changed again. This time in Newcastle-under-Lyme. Unlike the other councils, all 44 seats here were up for election at once. This meant the results would immediately determine who controlled the council. And Reform UK delivered a political earthquake. They won 27 seats outright. A clear majority. In one move, they seized control of the council and ripped it directly away from the Conservatives. That was the moment Reform stopped looking like a protest party. Because protest parties complain. Real parties govern. And now Reform UK was governing. Suddenly, Westminster wasn't laughing anymore. The terrifying reality for both Labour and the Conservatives is that Reform's rise appears to be pulling support from both sides simultaneously. Working-class Labour voters angry about immigration and the economy are switching to Reform. Conservative voters furious with Tory leadership are also switching to Reform. That creates a potentially lethal situation for Britain's political establishment. Because if both major parties lose support at the same time, the entire balance of British politics could collapse. And it's not just Reform causing problems. The Greens are rising too. Although they hadn't yet officially taken control of councils at the time this video was written. Expectations are growing rapidly around several London boroughs and urban councils where Green support is surging. Places like Lewisham, Hackney, Waltham Forest, Lambeth, and Norwich are now becoming serious battlegrounds. This means Britain isn't simply moving in one ideological direction. It's fragmenting. Some voters are moving sharply to the populist right. Others are moving aggressively toward the Greens and progressive politics. Meanwhile, Labour and the Conservatives are stuck in the middle, squeezed from both sides and increasingly unable to hold their old coalitions together. That's why these elections matter so much. This isn't just about councils. This is about whether Britain's political structure can even survive the next decade. And if the projections are correct, the damage may become even worse. Labour is now expected to lose roughly 1,200 councillors nationwide. The Conservatives could lose around 500. Meanwhile, Reform UK is projected to gain around 1,400 seats. The Greens could gain 600. Those numbers are extraordinary, especially considering Reform barely existed as a serious electoral force just a few years ago. Now they are becoming one of the most disruptive political movements Britain has seen in decades. And naturally, this disaster is placing enormous pressure on Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Even before the elections, Starmer was struggling badly. His approval ratings remained weak. Many voters viewed him as uninspiring. Internal tensions inside Labour were already growing. And several controversies had raised serious questions about his judgment and leadership. But after these election results, The knives may finally come out. Because politics is brutal. And political parties rarely forgive leaders who start losing. Already, speculation is exploding over who could eventually challenge Starmer if Labour's decline continues. Names like Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, and Andy Burnham are increasingly being discussed behind closed doors. Some Labour MPs are reportedly terrified that the party is sleepwalking into disaster. Others fear something even worse. That Reform UK may permanently replace Labour in parts of working-class England. And if that happens, British politics may never return to normal. Now, to be fair, it's still early. Scotland and Wales have not fully declared results yet. More English councils are still counting. The final picture could shift somewhat over the next 24 hours. But the direction of travel is already obvious. Britain is angry. The old parties are weakening. Voters are becoming unpredictable. And a political system that once looked stable now feels frighteningly unstable. The biggest question now is no longer whether Reform UK can win councils. They already are. The real question is this: can Labour and the Conservatives stop the collapse before the next general election? Because if these local elections are a preview of what's coming nationally, Britain may be heading toward the most chaotic political era in modern history. And for Westminster's ruling elite, that possibility is absolutely terrifying.